Hey, everybody, we're here with Dr. Cammy and Karen on how to stop binge eating. Probably one of the most important concepts in the world of overeating is how to stop binging. Cammy's just so brave in allowing us to coach in public her issue. Cammy, Karen, how are you today?
Good. Good. So here we
Nervous.
are. Here we are live, and Cammy is not given any questions in advance, and we are off to see her shine.
Yes, here we are. We're gonna delve into. She's doing great. Both are doing great about their sugar addiction, their binge eating, flour addiction, overeating, ultra processed foods, and now we're gonna. There's been an occasional binge happening. I'm gonna let Cammy tell us about that, and we're gonna dive into it. So get your tissues out because Tammy has them out too. Because we're gonna put this behind her.
I'm looking forward to that in some ways. In some ways, I'm a little nervous about letting go of my binge. I think that's part of the problem. It happens about every 3 to 4 weeks. And prior to recording, Karen and I had been talking about how I enjoy parts of my binge, how I look forward to how things are going to taste and how it makes me feel. It makes me feel full. It makes me feel safe. It makes me feel complete. It makes me feel like life is okay.
Yeah. So, I'm going to give you the technical, then we're going to dig in a little bit, okay? And what you're feeling is very normal. It's not abnormal at all. It's like, it's not what's the problem. It's what the solution. Addiction in general, all addictions are a solution at some time in your life to something that was happening. It's a way to escape it, a little bit of numbness, a little 20 minutes of numbness. The difficulty is that we have to keep re-ingesting to keep the feelings, the emotions at bay. And it also has a name because you've had longer stretches of abstinence with sugar called intermittent rewards. Intermittent rewards for the audience is that, and there used to be, it was such an egregious name that they had to change the name here in Los Angeles of a company called Dopamine Labs. And Dopamine Labs works with slot machine companies, gambling companies, and major platforms like TikTok and Facebook to make your devices sticky, they call it. That's the term they use, so that they keep coming back, right? And how they do it with both the slot machines and the devices, your phone and your iPad and everything, is that the rewards that they give you are intermittent. Have you ever noticed it seems like your phone has a name of its own or a mind of its own, where all of a sudden, it'll ring here, it'll beep then, it'll send the notifications at odd or weird different times. It's that intermittent, can't judge when it's going to happen that keeps people attached to it. The same thing with the algorithm and the scrolling and the flipping and the same thing with the slot machines. They found out that it wasn't the big wins that kept people attached to the machine. I mean, literally attached, because now they keep their card on a little cord and they're attached to the machine, right? Is that it wasn't the big wins, but it was the almost wins, right? It was just a almost got there, right? And subconsciously, the last part of this is that all addicts have a back door. A lot of people don't like the word addiction or addicts, but all people who are addicted to drugs and alcohol and food and ultra-processed carbohydrates and sugar have a subconscious, or sometimes the Cammy's is working its way to the conscious, and we're going to get right into that right now. It's working its way to the conscious because of the work that she's done. But they have a subconscious and unconscious back door. I don't want to stop this behavior because it works. And Cammy, I'll let you tell it, but she had a tragic event in her life, and this was her savior for a time. It was a way to numb out so that she didn't feel drastic feelings. So why don't you try and explain that part of it, and then we'll kind of get into it.
Okay. Two things come to mind for me. One is when I was younger, I lived in a family of 7. It was very chaotic a lot of the times. My mother was a narcissist with borderline personality tendencies, and I never knew what I was going to get from her. Like sometimes she was sweet and nice and supportive, and sometimes she wasn't. And I soothed myself with sugar. And I know that if you've been listening to our pods, you know that that's the case. And so anytime I could get my hands on sugar, I would soothe myself in that way. The second thing that comes to mind is I lost a second son. I lost a son in 1995 at 28 days of life in a terrible crib accident and overcame that. That was our first son. And we had two more sons. And then we went shooting for the girl, and the son was Brandon. And I was able to control my food around that time because I was motivated to be in good health to get pregnant again. And I joined Weight Watchers and was very controlled with my eating. And my son Brandon drowned in my sister's pool when he was 4 years old. So that was my second loss. It was very terrible. I wanted to die very badly, and I couldn't because I had these two boys to raise who were 7 and 9 at the time. And sugar became my friend. Sugar became my soulmate. Sugar became my go-to. I was still very busy as an OBGYN doctor, and it was something that I could legally be high on going into an operating room. And so it really did a favor for me. And the words that I use, we talked about this before we recorded about language, is that I say that it saved my life. And at that time, sugar worked very well for me. Well, now sugar is not working well for me. Sugar and flour and processed foods and my binges are working toward killing me. And I'm having some shame and guilt about giving up that relationship because of what it did for me in the past.
So, look, I mean, one of the things that happens with almost all my clients, I think the way that they're attracted to the work that we do is that I have people that literally they go to talk therapy for 20 years and they understand the problem at deep, deep levels, just like you did. And they've worked out why it's causing, but they can't seem to bridge the gap all the way to stopping it. And, in order to do that, we've got to, with this abstinence that you have, and when you get 2 and 3 and 4 weeks of abstinence, you've got to keep pushing through, and you've got to find more healthy substitutes for the sugar, like walking or yoga or whatever, and it'll help you get through them. But that said, that has to be present. That practice has to be present and in place. Meditation, prayer, a massage, whatever it is. These things have to be in place so that you can go to them. Also, the platform that we have where you can reach out to other people, myself included, or Karen or whoever. And, you had a very funny it's very real text to me. I said, anytime you're going to binge, you text me or call me, you know what I mean? And then you said, well, if I call you, then I'm not going to binge or something.
I did, LOL.
That's not that. So anyway, that all said, that's important that these things are in place. But what's more important, and this is one of the biggest parts of my practice, parts of my discovery, parts of trying to understand what's going on. And you guys will understand it, and hopefully the audience will too. These issues, both everyday stressors, and so, the folks that are listening probably did maybe not have had such a tragic thing as to lose a child, but they've had everyday stresses and strains and other things. A boyfriend broke up with them or something, and they dealt with it in the exact same way. The problem is I've never figured out if you need to, a lot of this work started through The Body Keeps the Score, Bether Vanderkolk, and Gabor Mate, The Myth of Normal, where addiction, drugs, alcohol, sugar, become this substitute for the pain and this count, and they both talk about this idea that you've got to let the pain rise. You've got to let the pain come up. And so you've got to experience it, you know what I mean? And the question that I'm asking, or the question that I'm curious about, and I don't think anyone has the answer, does it have to be 1-to-1? In other words, so did you numb with the sugar at that time all of these feelings, and are they trapped? I love the phrase, the issues are in the tissues. Is it trapped? Are they trapped in your body as those kind of books have described? And do you have to process them all out? Like, in other words, do you have to literally finish feeling the experience that you didn't feel then? And do you have to like cry and have the literal physical pain of hurt of that loss in order to be healed from it? You know, animals would have that theory, or they have that theory with animals, that they don't have it because they do this whole shaking, like when they have a trauma or something, they lose a baby, like a lion eats the baby of a giraffe or something. They shake and they fall on the ground, and then it's over with. You know, they processed it out, okay? And so I don't know. I don't think anyone does, and it doesn't matter. But you do have to let those feelings come and have the support systems, bumpers, if you will, the cushions of the practice, the groups, the friends, you know, in around you, so that you know that you're safe, you know, you're not going to die, because at the time it does feel like you're going to die, correct? You know, and then let it out, you know. And I'm a little hesitant to go there, you know. We are coaches and board certified, but, you know, we're not therapists, and we're very trauma aware. But, you know, I think that you've got to at least, I say revisit it, but you do have to let it out a little bit and just understand you're safe now, and you know, use substitute comforting methods, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Do you feel when you're coming up to one, yours seems to be pretty conscious. So tell us, like, what that feels like, what's building, if you can describe it. You know what I mean? What's building in you? What's you know, do you consciously say, I just want a minute not to think about this, or as best you can? Because what I find is people have a hard time putting words to that feeling, that they're ready to, you know, just quit feeling it.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Two things come to mind again. One is, so when my first son passed, it was 1995. And then in 2005, by then time had healed and I had started feeling good again. I was kind of under a lot of delusion because, you know, I thought, oh, life is starting to feel really good. And there were things going on, like financially couldn't get my life in order. Our marriage was not as good as I thought it was. And when my son Brandon, when my second son passed, all of that came to light very quickly. But before I lost my second son, I was starting to feel really good and happy again. And then I lost Brandon. And so there's a trust issue going on. There's like a trust in the universe, with how it's really frightening for me to trust the universe, because the last time I did, something really bad happened. And the other thing that comes to mind is that when my second son passed, I wanted to die really bad. And I made a deal with myself that I would get my kids up and running. I said, okay, get your kids up and running, make sure that they can function without you. And then you can make the decision whether or not you want to stick around. And so, that my goal was to get Michael out of college. And that happened in December of 2022. Michael got out of college. And so then I thought, there is still some unprocessed things here that I need to kind of go through, because when Brandon died, I put a lot of stuff on the shelf. I said, okay, you know, I can't fall apart right now. I have too much to do. I'm going to just take care of my children. Well, now they're up and running. And so I have the option to fall apart and take care of these things because I have the time. And so that's, yeah. So, you know, I feel like it's an opportunity that I could do right now, but it's really frightening. I think you're right. I think that there's, you know, and I feel like I'm so close. I'm so close to getting over, you know, these binges. And I think that has to do with it, the processing of the loss.
Yeah. Yeah, you do. One thing that came to mind when you were describing that is that you made a deal with yourself, and because you didn't trust the universe, you didn't know what to expect, was you're describing your narcissistic mother and growing up. It's like, what birth order were you? Do you know?
I'm number 5 of 7.
So I had a client whose mother was runner up in Miss America and ran it like that same 9 kids, I think. Anyway, ran it like a boot camp. And she was somewhere in that like lower group. And she was the only one of 9 or 8 or something that didn't go to an Ivy League school. She ran it like a boot camp for, performance or something. The father was an industrialist or something. And same kind of scenario, you know what I mean? It's like this lost child at 5, And so you're by yourself, and you don't know what's going to happen next. You don't know, like you said, it's going to get a nice one or a nice mama and so you learn to medicate that uncertainty with sugar. And so that's a learned behavior that can be unlearned. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I mean, but I do think that you have to, and I freaking hate this phrase, but you have to lean into the pain. You know what I mean? Until you just can't anymore, and then go to yoga, and then go call a friend or get on a meeting or, get a massage or just get down and give yourself 10 push-ups or walk or run or lift weights or do something that substitutes for that. Because eventually what happens is the walk or the run or the yoga becomes the binge, if that makes sense. It's almost a 1-for-1 trade. If you begin, and this is hard to do at the beginning because your go-to self-soothing is the sugar or the drugs or the alcohol, whatever. But if you go and do it, all of a sudden you'll say to yourself one morning that, I was really feeling, I were feeling like a binge, and you landed at yoga class and don't even know how you got there, kind of thing. And they will substitute whatever, as many as you can, different ones. And so you'll still have processed some of it, if that's the case, if our question is, do you have to process all of it? But you will also have used another way that will literally substitute, take the place of the sugar processing, if that makes sense. So,
Mike, can I say something for a minute? So one of the things I hear in this conversation, and it gives it the phrase a totally new meaning, and that is a near-death experience, right? Like she was so near Brandon's death. That's her near-death experience. Right. And I think that the binging, and I bring in my own issues with near-death experience, with the loss of my husband and my own behavior surrounding that, and the uncertainty regarding my mom's health. But this is, as you said, if there's a substitute, right, then Cammy has always put aside dealing with this near-death experience. And now the death is going to be the binge. And so, and Cammy, you've mentioned this before about grieving, right? And that's exactly, now I'm seeing a different part of it, right? And maybe like a PTSD where you've experienced this and we're just not prepared for it as human beings, right? And I'm guessing that everybody who's lost a loved one, they always in their grieving, and I'm sure that's why people used to have a 1-year period, right? Where it's don't expect any of life to be normal for 1 year. And the dealing with the subject, you can just kind of keep putting it off, right? And I think for you, Cammy, with Myers passing, you put it off until that year 10 and you were feeling safe, just like you and Mike said. And then boom, you were hit with Brandon's tragedy and you were just put right back, right? So now you've done it again, right? Now you've clawed your way back to where getting out of it. And now you have a huge fear of what's life going to look like? Like, what is happy future going to look like? And processing that. The other thing I hear too, Mike, is that Cammy can't just have a list of people that she can call when she's going to binge. She needs to review that list multiple times a day, so she knows that net is there. Always checking for the net is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I love that. No, it's true. That's absolutely true. That has to be a super safe list and a like one of the things, and let me see if this resonates, is that most people, and I'm definitely this way, is like, I don't want to call people and give them my problems, or, like they have enough problems kind of thing. I want to bother them. I don't want to bother them. I mean, I still to this day have that, it's like, I don't want to bother people. So yeah, I mean, you got to let that go, genuinely let that go. So, it's not easy, and you never do it perfectly. But I, for one, I mean, I could tell you my story of the need for this, but it's relative, but not that relative. You know what I mean? It's like where I was lucky enough to have this network in place, and it wasn't even a choice at that point. I had to reach out to these people, in order to grieve whatever I was grieving. I didn't even honestly at the time know what I was grieving, but I called it the dark night of the soul time. And it might be a little bit of, a dark time for a little bit. But again, I always like the phrase, the body will never give you more than you can handle. And so, and I do believe that. I mean, I don't think that you're not going to die from the feeling or the pain. You know what I mean? So let's kind of revisit again. Like I say this a lot, but it's not my job to make you cry, but it is our job, Karen, mine, anybody else on that list, to be there when you do. You know what I mean? So try and revisit like let's just say the last binge. Let's go around the day before or what was leading up to it, and not what you thought or what was going on, but what you were feeling that day, if you can remember it.
A couple of things come to mind. One was that, okay, so I knew I had looked on the calendar and I knew that I binged every 3 to 4 weeks. And so on day, and then I was like, oh, it's 21 days since my last binge. Okay. And so I'm like, okay, that's the beginning of week 3, going to week 4. So I bumped everything up. I bumped up my meetings, and I bumped up calling people. I bumped up spending time with people. I bumped up the time in the jacuzzi, the exercise, the journaling. I did not meditate I'm not very good at meditating yet, but I was really worried that it was coming. So I started bumping that up. And then, I started feeling, the day of, I think I was feeling, kind of like a loss. Like I was feeling like, there's a lot, like it's almost like I'm too afraid to go on in life without the binging, because I'm like, I'm holding on. I can feel it. It's close. And so, and I do want to say that, so my binge was shorter than usual. It wasn't very long. I didn't get to stage 3 of my binge. And the next day I wanted to binge again. I wanted to kind of continue it really, really badly. And I was sitting at my kitchen sink, and I got this really bad feeling about how I don't want to be with the sugar and I don't want to be without it. And it was very, very strong both ways. We talk about this in our other program about you get to this cliff where you can't live with it and you can't live without it. And so I called people, and I got Cindy on the line. I had to go through a couple of people. I got to Cindy. I don't know how I picked up the phone, because usually I'm already at the point of like, I was getting ready to get my keys and walk out the door because I don't have anything in the house to eat. But instead I called Cindy. And so it makes me feel like I'm getting stronger. And Cindy got on the line, and I just cried very hard for like 2 minutes. And Cindy just listened to me crying on the phone. And it was so sweet. And she was saying, it's okay. And then, 20 seconds later, she would say, okay, just get it out. And, I did it for maybe 2 minutes, and it felt so much better. And then we talked about it. We, kind of processed it a little bit together. And I was so grateful for her to be there for me like that. And so I'm grateful that I have people like that I can call, that will be there for me in a very supportive, loving way. 5, 6, 7, 8 people. I have people in my life like that.
Yes.
Interestingly, none of them are my sisters or family members.
Yeah, that's okay. Mine either.
And then I'm able to get it out, and then I'm able to not do the binge. So, this whole thing is really making me look forward to that, to working on it. The other thing I wanted to say is I do have a therapist. I have a therapist, Laura, who's wonderful, who has been doing some EMDR with me. And I might be ready for some deeper processing in that, area where we try to really get into the subconscious and see what's going on with what's still making me run in unhealthy ways.
Well, I love the story of Cindy. That is that 2 minutes was a huge pressure relief valve, if you will. And they realized that, you're not going to die. One of my mentors, and I've told you a little bit about her, but you can read up on her. And she's written a lot of books about women in recovery. And her name is Ann Wilson Shafts. She passed away recently. The name of her process is called Living in Process. And I want to get with them because they're trying to continue it after her death, but their marketing is terrible. And what they do is they bring everybody, they go to a retreat, and I don't know how they bring it on. I don't know that part of the process, but what happens is they bring them over to a mat and a very padded area, and they all get around them to make them safe. I've used this technique with success. Is that when that 2 minutes starts, or when you start to feel it, you get on the bed and you just pound the crap out of the bed, kicking and screaming, and really you become practice at letting it out. And, they call it living in process, where like the animal, like the giraffe that I described, when something happens, you just let it out, do the shaking, do the crying, and it was really, very helpful to me, and I think might be to you, is that when you're, starting to feel that, go on the bed and just, put your face in the pillow and scream and pound it and cry then. And it's what happens, apparently, I think, is that you learn to live in process. You learn to process these things without a substance, right? You learn to process without sugar, alcohol, whatever it is. And it doesn't become a backlog, as we've described. It doesn't become built up, as the books that I talk about that describe that, and that your friend's story is perfect. That's exactly what to do, to expand that ability, expand that. It's really a practice, it's really another one of the practices that you build your muscle of getting strong, that it's not a substance anymore, that the way to self-soothe is now not a substance anymore. So
I would also say that for Cammy, possibly taking on a daily practice of doing something that makes you uncomfortable, right? Like getting it out of the way every morning. So for instance, going up to a stranger and saying, hey, can I tell you a little about myself? Can I tell you, I have a YouTube channel. I would really like, I'm looking for new subscribers. Would that be okay if you, come and I can show you my channel and you can subscribe? Because remember you said you saw those guys in the restaurant that were talking carnivore and you really wanted to do it? Because what I'm hearing in some of this conversation is that if the sugar and the bin is the substitution for the numbing, right? So you've kind of gotten through, you don't have to numb, but you've got a fear. There's a fear that is bubbling up inside of you, and the binge is the way you get over that fear. If you've already gotten over fear in the morning already, you've already done it, right? Then getting over whatever other fear that is subconscious that you don't even know why you're thinking about it might be less apparent, might not make as much meaning to stimulate the idea of eating off plan, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So doing things that give me fear and make me uncomfortable, and having some success around those things will then make it easier for me when I have to deal with, when I have to deal with whatever's coming up. See, something may have come up that day, as I was building this fear that I'm going to not be able to not binge, that the fear just finally got so strong that I was just like, okay, just get it over with. So I like these ideas, about being fearless, about beating a pillow every day. I can do that.
Because it's like a cold plunge, right? It's like the cold plunge is what a lot of people are talking about right now online. And, Cammy refuses to do a cold plunge, and her cold plunge is actually going outside and getting into the hot tub. But she won't do it if it's cold outside.
You know what? There are showers up there. And after I get out of the hot tub, I go and shower off my suit so the chlorine doesn't stay on it. And I can crank it down to cold,
No, but I'm saying the thing is going out in the morning when it's cold, right? It's like, oh, I don't want to do that.
I do sometimes.
Yeah, okay, yeah. But those are easy things that can just get you maybe set up. Your brain is configured a little differently in the morning than just your regular routine.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're bringing some of this up, because the only difference that Bitten and I have is this one little piece. She believes more in the biochemical repair, and that, you almost have to put what we're discussing off a little bit until you're more biochemically repaired. And that means exactly what Karen was saying. There's all the rage where the cold plunges and stuff. And people are like doing digital detoxes and dopamine detoxes and what have you, is that what's more important to raise your baseline dopamine. So yes, Cammy, you want to crank that shower out after the hot sauna or jacuzzi or whatever down to cold. And you'd be surprised how long you can stay in it. And it will raise your baseline dopamine. A cold plunge would be better, but like I'm going tonight because I was 3 days without it. Is like I go to a steam, or we have both steam and dry where I go at the Y, and I go in both. I go steam, cold shower for 2 or 3 minutes, dry for about 5, then cold shower, then back to steam, back and forth. And I was looking up where I'm moving to, and they have some new thing. I've never heard of it. Even in Los Angeles, apparently they have it, but where through an hour guidance, you go in the infrared sauna for 12 to 15 minutes. Then you go to 3 to 5 minutes in the cold plunge. And then you do it 3 times. Like, it's like an hour. It's like guided. And really what it is raising your baseline dopamine. And everybody comes in depleted, or moreover, I do believe that because of our mothers, we basically started out life with less dopamine than the average person, or whatever average is, we started out with less dopamine. And so you would feel better naturally going through these things, just like walking or yoga, or running, whatever. So look, all of these practices combined, but more is good, and we want to do them all. But the moreover is like that kind of courage that you're describing to reach down and to have that crying fest, or when the crying fest starts, don't run away from it. Again, lean into it. I hate that phrase, but lean into it and let it come. Like we become practice. I know I did as a guy, don't cry or I'll give you something to cry about kind of thing. We become practiced even without the sugar before we get to the sugar to soothe ourselves at blunting our own emotions. Like I learned how to stop crying. I realized when I first went through my dark night of soul in my early 30s that I had not cried in nearly 20. I had not shed a tear because my brain, my father's narcissism and verbal and physical abuse had learned that I got tough, quote unquote, shut it down by 13 and had not cried since, right? Actually, it's probably almost 25. With your friend, you probably shut it down a little early because, well, you're on the phone with your friend, you know what I mean? As opposed to letting it go on that bed if it might last 5 or 10 minutes, So, and to just let it come, right? You're not going to die. The body's not going to give you more than you can handle. I know it's harder here. I've had it in these sessions and we just sit here and cry, the client does, and they feel safe, and it makes them be able to go to the next one without cutting it short, physically, emotionally cutting it short.
All right. So maybe next time I'll be crying lots of tears.
It's okay. It's hard
for me to let it go. because I had said when you said on your text, you could text me, before you binge. And I said, oh, that means if I texted you, I wouldn't binge, LOL. And then I said, it's very personal and private.
Yeah,
I said that on the text. I said, it's very personal and private what I do during these binges. And that's why once I decide it's going to happen, I don't reach out and I don't call. And so whatever's there that I have to get to, it's going to need some peeling of the onion,
And that's exactly what this is. That's a good description. It's the peeling of the onions here. You don't need the grief anymore, and you don't need the cover-up anymore. You know what I mean? Not that you don't need the grief, but, you need to finish what you started, which is normal and natural. It's just we have this substance now in the general populace, and, people use the alcohol and whatever. And if people would understand that this is what they need to do, there'd be a lot less obesity in the world, a lot less type 2, a lot less metabolic syndrome. This is the real work. And this is important to get the message out for your podcast, is that this is the real work of weight loss most of the time. That people are not making this connection. They're not making this, they're just not. They're eat less and exercise more. And then when this comes up, there's no guidance to change that behavior, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you're not unusual in any way, shape, or form. And everybody's grief stems from something different. It doesn't matter what the grief stems from if they're doing it because they're solving it the same way. So I got to do it again, but, again, not my job to make you cry, but I don't like to do it. But is there something of that day? We kind of got sidetracked on that day. Was there something that you could have?
Was that a day you were visiting your mom, Cammy?
Well, there's a good question. That's a really good question.
Remember that had come up that you were thinking about visiting her?
That's a really good question. That would make a lot of sense, too.
I think I did visit her. I think I did go and see her. Mm-hmm. I did go see her that morning, and then...
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Good catch right there. Good catch.
Yeah, I think I did go see her, and
the emotions all came back, They're like the ones that were trapped from way before the passing of the children,
Yeah, well, the issue that I'm having with my mom now is that she doesn't have a memory. She's in the memory care facility, and she doesn't really remember. She doesn't remember, her short-term memory's gone for sure, but she used to have memory about who you were. And now she doesn't remember who I am. Yeah. And so she just calls me the nice lady, and she doesn't even call me big or fat or ask me if I'm pregnant anymore. She stopped doing that recently. She was still asking me. But the thing that makes me I'm kind of angry about is that she's really sweet and nice to me when she doesn't remember who I am.
This is the same thing that happened to me.
Yeah. And so then it does hurt, because when she remembered who I was, she wasn't like that. She wasn't like that. But it turns out that I am. So see, here I am trying to make excuses for the way I feel, because I was going to say, I'm really sensitive, and I'm really sensitive around my mother. I'm especially sensitive around her, because I just am. And being so in the family dynamics, I was the golden child, I was the one that was going to be raised to become a doctor and a surgeon or something like that. And my job was to always be perfect. And so when I couldn't, and even when I was older, even into my 20s, it wasn't until I was in my 20s or so that I understood that you're not supposed to be perfect. I didn't understand that. If you're not perfect, then you're flawed. That's the way that I grew up understanding things. And so it was difficult to deal with my flaws because I wasn't perfect. And so I would suit that with sugar, So, one time my mom asked me when was I going to lose all my weight? And I said, when you die. And this was maybe about I don't know, 2.5 years ago or 3 years ago, maybe. And she's 94 now.
What was her reaction?
I don't remember what she just goes like that or something. I don't even think she said anything. I was with somebody and somebody said, "Oh, that's really rude," or something, or mean or something like that. I was with a friend or a sister or something. I don't remember who
Not
was
at
there.
all, man. I heard it in a meeting one time, and I said it to the girl I was living with at the time. You know, my father had to die for me to go to the next level of I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat that in any way, shape, or form. I believe it. And I don't think it's wrong or bad, or there's no feeling around that, It's just true,
I know, but I don't want to do that because she could live to be 100. What am I going to do? Sit around for the next 6
Oh, no,
years?
you can do it better than I did. Put it to you that way.
Well, no, but I think about that.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't really matter because she's basically gone. In her mind, she doesn't understand who I am or anything. So,
Right.
I mean, I just really feel like I'm running out of excuses.
Yeah.
I think I just have to deal with some tears and pain over losing that second baby.
Mm.
I don't really want to go back there, though, because the crying that I did at the time was really difficult.
Well, but Cammy, maybe that's something that you need to transform too.
The
Right?
language around that, right? The conversation around that.
Well, not even that. Maybe there's just always going to be crying, right? Because I feel that way with the loss of my husband. And it's just like, okay, that's okay. It might not be as, wailing and, throwing your arms in the air and everything, but it still may be a half hour every week or every month or whatever when the spirit moves you, right?
Yeah, well, I was crying about it last week.
And, too, Cammy, what I'm hearing is the conversation may be for you. Every 3 weeks, you go into a place where you honor Brandon or you spend time with the loss of Brandon, and otherwise you don't go there. And so maybe get your muffins, get your bagel, but before you indulge, do your crying.
No, don't get them. Don't buy them.
Well, because Cammy and I have talked about her planning her binges because I'm telling her she's already planning them because she already has the conversation. I binge every 3 weeks or every 3 to 4 weeks. So put it on your calendar and then see how often you can push it off.
But practice doing exactly what you're saying, Karen, but without it in the house.
I don't mean buy it now. I just mean when she has that urge, right? Because if she doesn't, because that may be the pain that she has to continue to go through. It may be another 3 months before you can just not even go and look at a muffin or buy a muffin. But look, you didn't buy the candy.
Right, for sure. You're on the right track. Is that, we have to figure out ways to finish. I think like a lot of my clients who know a lot about their issues, like, them pretty clearly, like really basically growing up, becoming, somehow being, in the hierarchy of codependent recovery, you're the hero of the family, which is what I was. It's like, you're the hero. You're going to, save the family, whatever, make the family, whatever. And, that's too much for a kid. You know what I mean? And the same thing now, the second child dies, you got to get right back to raising the kid. Even the deal you made with yourself, perfectionist deal, and it's like, I got to be perfect till they get out of college stuff. It's like you stunted the actual emotions for the perfection emotions, you know what I mean? And so if you just keep on processing this with other things besides sugar. Anyway, I want to see, I don't need us to talk. I need for you to talk, and you may stumble on something that will let a little bit of a dam go.
I just want to remember the feelings that I'm having right now because I just want to just keep crying and keep crying. And I want to remember this because I think it would be helpful for me to do this on a regular basis, because when I go to binge, it's like opening up a dam. And I think what we need to do is figure out how to not have the dam get created, right?
Exactly.
Like
Exactly right.
we just, you let it out in bits and pieces at a time, and then you don't get a big dam created where you need to do this. And I've really been thinking that I'm doing it with acts of loving kindness, I call it, my ALKs, and like, all of the dopamine hits and trying to raise all of that. But I think it has to be more of an emotional thing, more of a crying, more of a spending more time with Laura, But I think you're right, Karen. I don't think the grief is going to ever go away completely. And, you know that, right? It's like you've lost 2 kids. How is the grief going to ever go away? But,
No, because if you're a perfectionist and you're the one who's always going to save the day, you do think in your mind it's going to go away. That's
Yeah.
what I think.
Or
I
should,
think,
that word should.
yes, that
Yeah.
should, right? Part of you knows it never will, right? But the other part of you is saying, I should be over this.
I see what you're saying, and that's what's holding me back.
Yes, because what's life going to look like if it really does get to that point? Because that's what you don't know, that's the unfinished business. But
well,
also,
that's where the fear comes in, because life could be so rocket. It could just be so awesome. And I'm really fearful of that.
Yeah.
Whoa. What was that? You're fearful of an awesome life?
No, I said rockin', like so rockin' awesome. Like
Yeah.
life could be so awesome. And I'm really afraid of that. Because I'm afraid like the other shoe's going to fall. Like when is the other shoe going to fall again?
Yes. No, I know that feeling. No, you're right. That's very real. Very real.
And
Which it's kind of part of we talked about, I don't know if we were recording yet or not, but that people ask, the shame is the payoff of the binge. Okay. It's not the binge. It's not even the numbing. It's the back to the devil you know versus the devil you don't. The shame brings you back to that childhood where, at least you were, had a roof over your head, that's how you felt most of the time. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it's this pull to return to the bad feeling almost. So you have to like realize that, incrementally good things happen and they keep happening and they keep happening, So, you've got to avoid getting to that shame place. I always tell people I need to be watched when things are going well, right? I don't need to be watched. I can get myself out of any jackpot. You know what I mean? It's really, I need to be watched. And it's taken me forever. I feel like it takes forever, but things were going well, 21 days, probably a couple pounds down. Like that's not your norm from your back. You know what I mean? Unless you're pushing. And it was, I don't want to say easy, but it was not insanely hard. And you were just avoiding sugar and flour and you're losing weight and feeling good. You know what I mean? To not return there is important, And then also obviously let some of the emotions out too, because you're not numb. So it's a unified strategy. So let's go back to I don't want to get off track because I don't want to let you off the hook here. And I got time if you guys got time. Is that So you visit your mother. What are you feeling? Even though one thing that struck me is that you were like impressed that she was nice to you. You were like, why? My thought was, I was finishing your thought is like, why the hell she couldn't be like this when I was growing up?
Well, yeah, that's the feeling that I have.
Right.
Because.
Or is it a feeling of too late?
Yeah, too late.
It's a feeling of never enough.
With her,
Yeah, like I could never be enough for her. That's so interesting that now I'm like too much for her, right? Isn't that kind of interesting?
Yeah, blowing that a little bit.
Well, growing up, it was just, I could never be enough, like when you're 8 years old and she wants you to be boy twins, I remember thinking that not only was I the wrong sex, I was the wrong number of children, and like when I became a finalist in the Miss San Diego pageant when I was pre-med and I had already applied to med school. So I lost all this weight and I got in really good shape. And I had a girlfriend who I lived with. I took care of her kids and she wanted me to go try out because she was a previous Miss California. So anyway, I went to have her to shut her up, I went to the tryouts and became a finalist. But anyway, so even when I got to a beauty pageant, as I was applying to medical school, when I told her I got in, she said, "You're too bow-legged to be in the pageant."
Dang. No.
I mean, like, I just have to laugh about that because, like, how can I change my legs? Like, I actually did when I got my lateral knee replacements.
See, there you go. But
Now they're nice and straight.
But Cammy, what were you hearing her say when she said that?
That I'm not good enough, that I'm not perfect, that no matter how hard I try, I'll never be that perfect person.
And what if what she was really saying is, I don't want your heart to be broken. It's not because of anything other than your legs, and that was my fault because you were born with bow legs, and we never had them fixed. So if you don't win, it's nothing to do other than the fact that you have bow legs.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult to let go of all of the mean.
And it could be, Cammy, that's what she was always doing in her cruelness, right? It's like, I want you to be strong and survive because I know how hard life is and life really sucks. So don't ever, ever rely on anything other than yourself for your self-worth.
Well, I know that she did do a lot of those things in my life. She really gave me a lot of what she didn't get because she came from a really difficult place.
Hey, don't go there now. Look,
she did. But, I love her. I mean, I really love her, and I've worked so hard to overcome so much to just really love who she is, and that she did do the best she could. She did the best she could, but the reality is, like, when she doesn't come to your graduation from medical school because her dad's there with his wife,
so,
like, what the hell?
This is important. That look, don't, I know it's true. My mother used to say my father had good motives and bad methods. Okay. Like, they wanted to, whatever, give you a beating because you did something wrong. It's like, this is, make you stronger, but it's all true. And he did give me a lot, and she did give you a lot, but we're not talking about that right now. We're talking about how you felt. This is the problem, is like what people actually felt. In Gabor's work, he talks about, like, it doesn't really matter what happened to you, right? What happens is how you dealt with it, right? As a child, as a vulnerable child, right? And so it's super important that you realize that the bad things she said caused angst and headed you to the sugar. You know what I mean? And you didn't internalize them, didn't grow through them or self-soothe through them. You self-soothe through a substance. And when you go visit her, and that all those literal, that this would go back to bitten stuff, the literal miswiring of your brain was reactivated there at the care center. The only solution that limbic brain knew was to use sugar that afternoon. You know what I mean? It's like it didn't know another process to end that confusion, that hurt, that pain. So
I don't understand that because it does know another process. I mean, I have other tools.
But it was reverted back, because that's the strongest. And Lustig says the same thing. You can't fight that biochemistry. You can't fight that miswired brain.
I mean, that's how it feels too. It's almost, like I can't not do it.
Right. Right. That's what everybody says. You know what I mean? And you can't fight that miswired brain. You've got to literally rewire it, and you've got to let the frontal cortex take over and say, I have new tools. Say it over and over as you leave the facility, as or when you're thinking of the binge, you say, I have other tools, and use them, and other tools, because you've got to rewire the process. Because the process was, since you were 3 or 4 years old, to feel that uncertainty, fear, scared, blah, blah, and then to use the sugar. And that's how your brain was wired. You know what I mean? It feels like death. It does. It feels like you will die if you don't do this, because that's how it was wired.
Okay.
That doesn't preclude, again, this is a chicken and the egg thing. I don't think it precludes needing to process this stuff through. But it might. I'm open to that idea that you can rewire your brain away from what was wired in originally, which was if there's worry, fear, pain, anxiety, sugar is the answer. And being the answer means that it's like running from a lion, and it's like, this will solve me. If I run, the lion won't catch me, and if I use sugar, then the feelings won't catch me in this case.
All right. Well, this is good work on catching my feelings.
It is. It's raising the awareness out of the subconscious. The reason people keep repeating this process is they don't ever do this understanding work. They don't move it from the limbic brain, the deep reptile brain, to the frontal cortex, where you can override it. They just let it happen unconsciously. I'm freaking amazed at what we've done today. I mean, again, if you feel like there's more processing that you would want to, sometimes there's just an end to it.
Yeah, I'm exhausted. I can tell you that.
Yeah, you'll need a nap, but you will feel a catharsis, afterwards, a little bit of relief after the crying.
Well, I think that's probably part of the rewiring of the brain, right? It's like the whole thing is you've got to get exhausted. I mean, that's what we learned with my mom's stroke. You make your new neural pathways and then you sleep so that you can imprint them and you have a new neural pathway. And I think probably when you continue to do this work, eventually you literally wear yourself out and you're tired of that whole conversation. So you don't do it anymore.
I agree with that.
You've got something new.
And I think we should do it right here on this thing. You would provide humanity with an insane value. And, and to know that the perfect doctor is the same as every other person, they're going to be like, if she can do it, I can do it, kind of thing. You know what I mean? And, I'm 110% in your corner for the weight loss and the processing to peace. Let's leave it at processing to peace.
Amen.
That you can process this out so that it doesn't come back in the form of a binge,
All right. Well, to be continued.
I can't, again, I have to reiterate, man, I cannot believe how brave you've been to do this eventually when it hits the YouTube full view of the world, because it's a huge value, it's a huge.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate everything that you do for me, Mike.
Hey, you guys, you're doing the work.
Good work. Good work.
It's really good work. I'm just telling you, the people that I've gone through with in private, that you're doing it in public is too courageous, man. Courageous. It's great.
Well, thank you. And I hope that it does help somebody who's been watching today. So, yeah. All right, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Take good care. Bye.